Ambassador Toby Monroe stood just off-center from the shimmering banquet table, glass of something blue and fizzy in hand, his other resting atop a worn leather satchel that had once belonged to his grandfather. The grand chamber of the Galactic Peace Banquet spiraled above him like a gemstone cathedral, glass domes, suspended lanterns, translucent arches engineered from meteorite silk. A triumph of diplomacy and engineering. And yet, Toby found it cold. He offered a charming smile to the passing delegation of Zevari, a fish-like species who bowed with their neck gills. He returned the gesture with a lazy dip of his head. "Pleasure's all mine," he said with southern velvet in his voice. Across the room, his nephew Toby was poking at a jelly-based appetizer, the kind that shimmered but never quite stayed still. The boy's eyes were bright with curiosity and the ever-present mischief of an earth-born 11-year-old. His tie was crooked, his sleeves rolled too high. His cheeks still had the faint sunburn from hiking the Rockies the week before. "I think it's breathing," Toby whispered. "It is," Toby said calmly. "So be polite. Don't eat it unless it asks." A snort came from behind them. Syndic Thrina, the reptilian protocol officer of the Empire, stood tall and gleaming, ridged scales lacquered with gold accents. Earth's culinary confusion continues to be illuminating. Toby didn't blink. "We aim to educate, Syndic." Thrina's slit-pupiled gaze narrowed. "The boy is permitted here, by courtesy only. Keep him from wandering." "He's more courteous than most of your senators, I'd wager," Toby murmured with a smile, then louder, "Of course. He'll stay by me." A trumpet of wind chimes signaled the arrival of High Chancellor Varkle, the Empire's towering insectoid leader. His multifaceted eyes caught the starlight, his voice a clicking wind through glass. "Let the banquet commence," he declared. "To peace among stars. To clarity of rule." "To peace," Toby echoed, lifting his glass, but not drinking. The chamber hummed with chatter, and somewhere near the fourth tier, a band of raven musicians began playing something that sounded like dying whales set to jazz. Aliens toasted. Waiters glided on magnetic boots. Conversations sparkled like silver threads through the air. Toby leaned closer. "Do you think they like us?" Toby's eyes remained on the Chancellor. "They don't have to like us, son. Just fear misjudging us. But this is peaceful, right?" "Everything's peaceful," Toby said. "Right until it isn't." Toby squinted at the jelly again. It blinked. Then the boy laughed and wandered just a step too far. The moment was small, barely a breath of time. He pulled from his pocket a tiny drone shaped like a beetle, the kind Earth children used in school to map terrain. It buzzed softly, harmless, darting from his palm and spiraling upward in a curious dance. 2 Imperial guards moved like a triggered spring. Their energy lances buzzed alive in red arcs. "No, no, no," Toby said, stepping forward, hand raised. But Toby didn't understand. His hand lifted, palm up, trying to coax the beetle drone back. He laughed, unaware that laughter had no translation in fear-driven minds. The Chancellor snapped his claws once. The guards fired. The drone dropped, charred and hissing. So did Toby. The silence was total. No screams, no gasps. Just the faint whir of still hovering servers and the lingering echo of a child's final laugh. Toby didn't move at first. Then, very slowly, he set down his drink, walked forward, knelt beside the boy. With gentle hands, he closed Toby's eyes, brushed the hair from his forehead, and placed the broken drone back into the child's lifeless grip. When he stood, his face was composed, but all the warmth had drained from his gaze. It was the same face he'd worn in peace, yet utterly different. He turned to the Chancellor. "Would the Empire care to explain?" Thrina straightened, looking annoyed rather than ashamed. The boy engaged unauthorized aerial movement. Security protocol mandates immediate neutralization of perceived threats. He was a child. He wielded technology. "A school toy," Toby said quietly. "No weapons. No shields. No threat." "The Empire does not guess," Varkle intoned. "It acts." I noticed. No one else spoke. Not the Kravan with their purple fur. Not the feathered Zillan ambassadors. Not even the usually verbose Geltree twins, who were now watching Monroe as though seeing him anew. I believe we'll retire to our quarters, Toby said. Grief is best managed with solitude. The Chancellor nodded once. You will not retaliate. Galactic code is clear. Toby gave a slight bow, one that had once been considered a gesture of surrender on Earth, but now meant something else entirely. Of course. We obey the code. He turned on his heel, his boots making no sound against the crystal floor, and walked from the chamber with quiet dignity. Behind him, a pair of servers carried the boy's body on a floating pallet, the broken drone resting beside his heart. In his quarters, Toby closed the doors, dismissed the security bots, and sat at his desk. The light from a nearby gas giant filtered through the observation window, painting the room in deep reds and fading golds. He opened his leather satchel. Inside were exactly 3 things: a silver pocket watch, a vial of earth soil, and a secure EarthCom transmitter shaped like a fountain pen. He activated it with a click. A face appeared, Admiral Kayla Rourke, in her combat blacks, hair tied up, expression already grim. Say it, she said. Protocol 9. Silence on the line. Confirmation code? He looked down at the watch. Pressed back. A name etched in cursive. Toby Monroe. He was 11. Kayla's jaw clenched. Understood. Initiating sequence. You want dignified or dramatic? I want them to feel the absence. Copy that. He clicked the transmitter off. Back at the banquet hall, 100 alien delegates returned to eating, drinking, and convincing themselves that nothing of importance had occurred. That the human child had been an unfortunate error, nothing more. That Earth, sentimental as ever, would grieve, petition, perhaps whine, but not act. Syndic Thrina made a note in his data slate about increased security measures for future Earth interactions. Chancellor Varkle accepted another toast. Only one delegate, a quiet, owl-like creature from the neutral Uthi Confederation, turned to a peer and whispered, "They won't forgive this." "Of course not," replied the other. "But what can they do?" The Uthi delegate glanced toward the space where Monroe had stood. "I fear," he said, "we are about to find out." Toby stood at the window for a long time, watching the stars blur in slow, serene silence. He remembered the moment Toby first held that drone in his hand, back in Colorado. How the boy had laughed as it zigzagged through the pine trees, dodging branches, mapping sunlight. He remembered thinking then that humanity had become too soft, too idealistic. But that wasn't true. Humanity had just grown patient. Patient enough to build things no one else dared imagine. Quiet enough to let others believe they'd grown weak. Courteous enough to deliver warnings with smiles. He'd given the galaxy every chance. He poured a glass of water, not alcohol. He'd need his mind sharp for what came next. He sat at his desk, opened a file labeled Contingency 11, Diplomatic Termination Cascade. He began with the smallest worlds, the border systems, the ones no one would mourn. Even here, vengeance would be precise. Across the galaxy, sensors began to blink with ghost signatures. Cargo vessels changed course. Civilian research teams filed flight plans to known Imperial mining zones. Unmanned supply drones transmitted in languages that hadn't been spoken in public for 50 years. Above all this moved the silence. The dangerous, patient, grieving silence of a species that had never forgotten Hiroshima, never erased Dresden, never lost the memory of what it meant to burn. At the bottom of the file, Toby attached a single sentence meant for broadcast when the moment was right. It read, "This is for Toby. He liked the stars. Now, we're returning the favor." Outside, the stars continued to shine, brilliant, indifferent, unknowing. But they were watching the wrong planet. Earth was coming, and Earth was done smiling. High Chancellor Varkle issued a statement 3 days after the boy's death. Broadcast across 77 star systems, it was a masterclass in veiled arrogance, elegant in phrasing, clinical in tone, and absolute in its lack of remorse. It spoke of unfortunate incident protocols, interspecies learning curves, and the Empire's unwavering commitment to peace through order. Nowhere was the child named. Nowhere was Earth acknowledged beyond a single phrase, the minor delegation representing Terra. The Galactic Council chamber echoed with laughter that day. Not from cruelty, but from a belief in their own narrative. Earth was a backwater blue marble, a sentimental species that wore emotion like a badge and folded under pressure like poorly designed polymers. A child had died. A polite envoy had withdrawn. The story they believed had ended. Ambassador Toby Monroe sat in silence in his observation suite aboard the diplomatic vessel Horizon's Grace, sipping tea brewed from Appalachian mint leaves. The sweet bitterness settled on his tongue as reports came in, one by one, from the outer rings of the Terran Defense Network. Fleet mobilization, 0. Weapon activation, none. Communications, still active, but utterly banal. Agricultural trade logs, weather patterns, diplomatic niceties. Nothing that screamed retaliation. Nothing that roared vengeance. Exactly as planned. He clicked through council footage, watched the smirking faces, read between the lines of statements dripping with false magnanimity. Varkle spoke of forgiveness, of not allowing fear to dictate diplomacy. Trina rattled off protocol like a religious rite. Other species chimed in, some dismissive, some amused, all united in their misjudgment. Toby smiled, but his eyes were not kind. Back on Earth, buried 5 levels beneath the Colorado Defense Archive, Admiral Kayla Rourke stalked through a cold steel war room with a mug of scorched coffee and a scowl that could bend iron. She walked like a former Marine and spoke like a woman with no more patience to lose. "We've got 3 fronts soft enough to push through without a single weapon fired," her lieutenant said, flicking holographic maps across the screen. "Supply worlds, mostly. Non-military. Not critical." "Good," she said. "We're not aiming for critical. We're aiming for unforgettable." He hesitated. "Still no direct authorization for open retaliation?" Kayla smirked. "Who needs open?" In public, Earth was quiet. In shadow, it moved. On the planet Tolbra 9, a Terran agricultural envoy politely terminated trade agreements. On Gonvira, human archaeologists announced a return home, leaving behind silent excavation rigs. On the space station Alice Prime, Terran medics vacated their clinics, closing up with handwritten notes. "Thank you for your kindness. We wish you health." At first, it all looked like grief. Then someone noticed the pattern. Every location abandoned by Earth soon lost something else. Comm static, power fluctuations, minor malfunctions in orbital infrastructure. Someone else noticed the satellites, new ones, appearing where Earth used to orbit, silent and black as void. Someone finally asked, "Where are the humans going?" No one had an answer. Meanwhile, Monroe attended the council's next session, virtually. His holographic projection flickered into the chamber with polite punctuality. He wore the same dark suit. His voice held the same calm cadence. But something in his posture had shifted. Less the friendly scholar, more the waiting predator. "The Terran Confederacy wishes to extend condolences," he said. "We regret the escalation of emotions. We trust the Empire has conducted a thorough internal review." Chancellor Varkle's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. "The matter is closed. Our condolences to your species. Let us move forward." "Of course," Monroe said. "Progress is a beautiful thing. Like gravity, inescapable." A few delegates chuckled. A few winced. The council moved on. That evening, Monroe sent a care package to the Imperial High Council. Inside was a memory crystal containing Earth music, jazz, blues, orchestral lullabies. Harmless, charming, accompanied by a note written in human cursive. For moments of reflection, from the boys' favorite playlist. The music made its way through official channels, eventually embedded in the Imperial archives. 3 hours later, a minor comms blackout occurred across 2 Imperial research stations. Coincidence, said the analysts. Correlation, said the skeptics. Sabotage, whispered the wise. Monroe kept sipping his tea. Across the galaxy, alien diplomats still mocked the Toby incident behind closed doors. A Krull ambassador laughed over drinks. They send children to galactic courts and cry when they die. Do they expect medals for restraint? His laughter ended 2 days later when his private yacht vanished in an asteroid belt that wasn't supposed to move. No debris, no distress beacon, just silence, and a single fragment of human fabric floating in the void. A child's sock with a stitched name. Toby. Back on Earth, Rourke launched Operation Threadbare. No fleets. No invasions. Just whispers. Data ghosts slipped through Empire networks, mimicking updates. Schedules altered by seconds. Docking permissions shuffled. Cargo manifests rewritten. Slowly, imperceptibly, the Empire's logistical veins began to clog. Monroe continued attending council meetings, always polite, always predictable. He congratulated the Tel-Len Accord for their mining treaty. He offered condolences to the Garathi after a starquake. He recommended a poem once recited at a boy's funeral on Earth. "Nothing gold can stay," he quoted softly. "Even stars forget." A few delegates began watching him more closely. One, a silver-scaled Qadari with centuries of tactical experience, said to her aide, "That man speaks like a mourner but walks like a storm." The aide replied, "They lost a child. That doesn't make them dangerous." The Qadari's tail twitched. "It makes them unstoppable." The next escalation came not from Earth, but from fear. An imperial governor on the fringe world Valax ordered the arrest of all Terran nationals, pending further review. 3 dozen humans were taken into custody. Within 12 hours, the planet's weather grid collapsed. Tidal regulators failed. Seismic stabilizers jittered like broken toys. No ships arrived to assist. No rescue came. Just a broadcast. A child's voice laughing. Then, tag, you're it. The Terrans in custody vanished. No trails. No casualties. Just gone. When asked by the council if Earth was responsible, Monroe offered only a gentle tilt of his head. "We left Valax 2 weeks ago," he said. "I do hope everyone's safe. Weather is unpredictable." The Chancellor bristled. "Do not play games." Monroe leaned forward slightly. "Sir, Earth is not playing. We are remembering." Thrina slammed a datapad on the desk. "We followed protocol." Monroe's voice dropped to velvet. "So did we." In the council chamber, the mood had changed. Laughter was scarce now. Delegates whispered in their native tongues. Earth was no longer merely emotional. Earth had grown quiet, and quiet in space was the sound of something approaching. One bold delegate, a chitin-clad Axari, finally asked the question aloud. "What is Earth doing?" Monroe gave him a long, slow smile. "We're setting the table." Rourke's teams rolled out Phase 3. Civilian vessels began to drift toward Imperial borders, transports, freighters, research rigs. All under neutral IDs. All legally protected. All carrying one common feature: silence. They did not broadcast. They did not respond. They simply orbited and waited. Empire sensors flagged them as non-threatening. Then the comms disruptions began. Sector-wide brownouts. Fleet pathing errors. Asteroid fields recalibrated with dangerous precision. Orbital mirrors aimed off course. Agriculture domes overheating. All without a shot fired. All while Earth denied involvement. "Sabotage is such a loaded word," Monroe told the press. "We prefer entropy." Backroom deals emerged. The Kravan quietly offered Earth mining rights. The Geltree requested trade exclusivity in exchange for silence. The Uthi Confederation pledged neutrality. The Empire dismissed them as cowards. Rourke called them visionaries. At last, Varkle summoned Monroe to a closed council session. "Enough of this dance," the Chancellor said, flanked by guards. "You seek retribution. State your terms." Monroe looked around the silent chamber, then placed a single photo on the table. It was old-fashioned, printed on Terran paper. The boy, Toby, sat cross-legged on green grass, holding a telescope too large for his frame. "He wanted to see the stars," Monroe said. "He was a child." "The child threatened order," Thrina insisted. Monroe looked her dead in the eyes. "Then let me show you what order dies like." He stood, smoothing his coat. "You killed the boy. We are erasing your memory of him. And when we're done, you won't even remember why." The session ended in chaos. The Empire called for war. Earth never declared. They didn't have to. They just continued. By the week's end, 6 Imperial outposts had vanished from official maps. Bureaucrats blamed file errors. Analysts blamed sabotage. Monroe said nothing. He didn't need to. The final communication from Rourke before Blacksite comms went dark was brief. "We're ready," he replied with 3 words. "Let them wonder." And so they did. Across the stars, in every council hall, command center, and trading floor, one question rose louder than any other. What did we do? But they knew. They all knew. They just didn't know what it would cost. Not yet. But soon. Admiral Kayla Rourke stared at the screen in her war room, one leg crossed, a steel-capped boot tapping rhythmically. Across the table, her officers watched with held breath as the feed from orbital platform Theta 19 blinked into focus. The target was Imperial, a mining world tucked against the edge of known space. Non-militarized, unremarkable, unaware. Last chance to reconsider, her second-in-command offered. "This still counts as escalation." "We're not escalating," Rourke replied. "We're calibrating their memory." The command was silent. Then she leaned forward and tapped the console once. The screen went black. From a distance, it looked like the world blinked. Theta 19 super-resolution optics caught everything. The mining base folding in on itself, gravity compressors reversing polarity, entire ridges crumbling into white-hot singularities for a fraction of a second before winking out. No shockwave, no explosion, just removal. 20,000 Imperial workers. 5 command towers. 3 orbital satellites. Gone. As if they had never existed. Rourke sipped her coffee. Begin the poetry drops. The next morning, Imperial systems across 4 quadrants lit up with strange data packets. Unintelligible code hidden inside harmless telemetry. By the time analysts decrypted them, the files had already rewritten themselves into lullabies. Human voices, children's voices, reciting nursery rhymes over the comm channels of sleeping worlds. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star." Syndic Thrina received one on her personal line. At 3 in the morning. "I wonder what you are." She unplugged her comm unit and ordered her guard doubled. In the Galactic Council, panic bloomed in the spaces between words. Delegates whispered. Species that had once dismissed Earth as a sentimental footnote now watched the skies over their own planets. A single phrase kept surfacing across independent intelligence networks. Toby Protocol. Ambassador Toby Monroe sat in his suite aboard the Horizon's Grace, watching silent footage of Imperial cruisers scrambling across the galactic spine. Not fighting, just moving, shuffling pieces on a board they no longer understood. He answered no calls. He read no council messages. He simply watched and waited, his eyes like a man remembering things long buried beneath diplomacy. The galaxy had misread humans. They had mistaken smiles for softness, hospitality for helplessness. They hadn't realized that Earth's greatest weapon wasn't technology, it was time. Patience, calculation, a capacity for pain so deep it could be transformed into precision. The death of one child had rewritten the war lexicon. Imperial Military Command issued full deployments across 3 sectors, trying to locate what they were now calling Terran Go cells. Dozens of Earth-affiliated freighters were impounded. Human citizens were interrogated. Embassies were locked down. Yet nothing pointed to a central source. Because there wasn't one. Humanity had stopped acting like a state. It had started behaving like a species. On a moon colony named Jedra, known for its spice farms and retired Imperial scientists, a freighter labeled Hopeful Transit arrived bearing fresh water and grain. The Port Authority waved it through after a short scan. No weapons. No anomalies. It delivered the supplies. Then it left. 6 hours later, Jedra's gravity field began fluctuating. Weather patterns reversed. The colony's central server began to play Earth jazz over loudspeakers, with no known transmission source. The melody was soft, warm, gentle. By the time the evacuation began, half the colony had disappeared. Varkle convened an emergency summit. "This is undeclared war," he roared, mandibles clicking with fury. "Earth must be sanctioned, cornered, dismantled." But none of the other council members moved. Not the Kadari, not the Zillan, not even the Raven. They had seen the pattern. Earth didn't demand tribute. It didn't claim territory. It didn't even answer questions. It just took something. Something specific. Something measured. Always followed by silence. "They are setting precedents," muttered the Uthi ambassador. "This isn't revenge. This is myth-making." Monroe appeared via holofeed. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The room fell into a hush as his image leaned slightly forward, offering the same ever-smiling eyes, the same quiet demeanor. Then he said simply, "You've made your apologies. We've made our peace." Varkle hissed, "You dare call this peace?" Monroe blinked once. "We haven't even started the war." And then he vanished. On the edge of known space, another world, Viraprime, disappeared. This time, the galaxy noticed. Viraprime had been a jewel in the Empire's economic crown, a thriving financial hub, orbital casinos, merchant docks overflowing with trade. In under 4 minutes, the entire orbital grid shut down. Planetary systems failed. Comms died. And then everything stopped. No explosion. No fire. Just cessation. As if the universe had changed its mind. Human engineers on Earth cheered. The weapon hadn't been a bomb. It had been a software cascade delivered via investment algorithm 3 weeks earlier. An economic packet hidden in a loan contract, executed via cross-system trading bots. All done legally. All signed by the Empire. Monroe updated his files. Rourke marked another system as reconciled. At last, Varkle did what no emperor had done in 1,000 years. He requested a private audience. The call came through on a secure channel. Monroe answered it while trimming the bonsai tree in his private quarters. "You win," Varkle said without preamble. His voice had none of imperial thunder. "Name your terms." Monroe placed the shears down. "I'm not here to win," he said. "Then what do you want?" Monroe stared at the small, patient tree. "I want you to learn." "We've learned. We've paid." "You killed a child," Monroe said. "And you thought it would go unnoticed. That your protocols, your hierarchy, your towering pride would protect you. But what you didn't understand," he looked up, "is that humanity doesn't fight like you. We don't conquer. We remember." Varkle was silent. "I want the Empire," Monroe said, "to lose something it loves." The Emperor leaned in, the edges of his composure cracking. "Then take a fleet, a throne, a sector." Monroe shook his head. "Those are things. I want your silence. I want your people to whisper our names in the dark. I want the next child to live, because someone remembered Toby." The channel cut. Back in the war room, Rourke received her next target list. 7 colonies. 3 fuel depots. 1 archival moon. She asked for clarification. The reply came with Monroe's approval. "Erase the stories they tell themselves." Operation Eclipse began. Earth's approach was not loud. It was not cruel. It was methodical. Every location was chosen for meaning. A birthplace of doctrine, a repository of history, a symbol of imperial pride. Not because Earth wanted to own them, but because Earth wanted them forgotten. The archival moon, Seraphis Theta, was last. As it crumbled into its own artificial black hole, Rourke watched the records fall. Billions of documents. Centuries of imperial history. Entire dynasties worth of lies. Gone. Monroe sent one final message. Text only. "We grieved for a boy. You grieve for an era. Let's call it even." For a time, things went quiet. Ships stopped vanishing. Sectors stabilized. The council dared hope. Then, the dream fractured again. In the heart of imperial space, a central processing array began broadcasting an old Earth song. Not modern. Not complex. Just a single voice, Toby's voice, taken from a home video. "I want to see the stars. All of them." Then silence. Then a black flag rising above an orbital tower. The humans had never declared war. They simply stopped pretending it wasn't one. Back in the Colorado archive, Rourke sat in her office, eyes on the starlit map above her desk. She spoke aloud to no one, Politeness ends at the event horizon, she said. They crossed it. Now we carry them through. The galaxy didn't understand yet, but it would. It always did, eventually. The fortress world of Raker stood as the final line. The Galactic Empire's heart, wrapped in asteroid belts, cloaked by thermal deflectors, defended by a defense net older than most civilizations. From orbit, it looked invincible. Even now, even after the vanishing colonies erased archives and systemic implosions, Raker glowed with pride. It was here that High Chancellor Varkle summoned his last allies, a war council in name only, for there was no unity left, only desperation. Varkle stood taller than he had weeks ago, but the weight behind his words had faded. His wings were polished, his exoskeleton freshly lacquered, but his gestures betrayed the truth. A tremble in his secondary claws, a pause before each syllable, the way his eyes flicked toward shadows when doors opened. "We will make a final stand," he declared. No one cheered. Behind closed doors, his command staff whispered terms like psychological warfare and species-scale trauma. They no longer spoke of victory. They debated survival. Toby Monroe arrived unarmed. The humans sent no fleet, no envoy, no threats. Just Monroe, aboard a sleek, black diplomatic shuttle, requesting audience with the Chancellor under terms of non-hostile closure. The Empire agreed, with heavy suspicion, and a dozen guns trained on his vessel as it descended. He stepped alone into the throne hall, a dark suit over a gray shirt, his tie slightly crooked. In his hands, a small leather-bound book. Varkle watched him approach, claws clenched tight, antennae twitching. "You came to accept our surrender." Monroe didn't stop until he stood within arm's length. "I came to explain what happens next." The guards tensed. Monroe didn't flinch. He opened the book. A photograph fluttered to the floor. Toby, smiling in a garden, one sock missing, a telescope cradled in his lap. Varkle's voice dropped. "You burned systems for him." "We remembered him," Monroe said. "You erased his name from the incident report. You didn't even list him as a casualty. He was a minor. An accident. He was a child," Monroe said, each word a sharp nail. "You killed him for breathing in your empire. And you thought the story would stop there." "We've paid," Varkle said, louder now. "You took hundreds of worlds." "We erased them," Monroe corrected. "No graves. No flags. No monuments. Gone. That's not revenge. That's silence." Varkle's voice cracked. "Then what else do you want from us?" Monroe reached into his coat and placed something on the ground. A small projector. It lit up. Toby's voice filled the room. Not a speech. Not a threat. Just a birthday video. "Thanks for the telescope, Uncle Eli. I'm gonna find Mars tonight. Then Saturn. Then all of it." The boy laughed. The guards didn't move. None of them could. Monroe watched the playback to the end. Then he looked at Varkle again, this time not as a diplomat, but as a father who had buried too much. "I want you," he said softly, "to feel what it means when no one remembers your name." The Chancellor's eyes narrowed. "What have you done?" Monroe's smile was slow. Not cruel. Not gleeful. Inevitable. "I gave Earth time." At that precise moment, Raker's stars blinked. Not from the sky. From the minds of every server, sensor, database, and AI node tied to the Empire. Entire records vanished. Territory lines, language roots, identity tags, genetic markers. The very concept of the Galactic Empire began to unravel. Ships lost registry. Military chains of command dissolved mid-sentence. Protocol files became corrupted lullabies. Rourke's masterstroke. An information virus seeded months ago in innocuous treaties and trade logs. It hadn't activated on command. It had waited for the right day, the right heartbeat, synced to Monroe's pulse through the projector's activation. A child's voice as trigger. On Earth, the sky filled with names, systems once owned, now marked unclaimed. In the Empire, senators screamed. Fleet admirals were locked out of their own ships. Even the throne room's power flickered, casting Varkle in sudden darkness. "You used memory as a weapon," he gasped. "No," Monroe whispered. "You did. You just never realized we'd perfect it." One by one, Raker's planetary defense towers went offline. Not exploded. Not invaded. Forgotten. From the surface of the moon shell 9, Rourke observed the collapse. She stood on a wind-swept ledge, binoculars steady in her hands, watching Raker's atmosphere flicker as its satellites blinked to black. It was a poetic view, no blood, no scream. Just entropy, precise and personal. Her comm pinged. "It's done," Monroe said. "I see that," she replied. "Status. Your friend's gone. The records are dust. Even the old coins won't know his face." Monroe closed his eyes. For a moment, just one, he allowed the weight of the campaign to rest against his chest. He thought of Toby again. Not the boy who died, but the boy who lived. Who asked questions no one could answer. Who built joy from broken drone parts. Who believed the stars were waiting. He opened his eyes. "Shut it down." Rourke blinked. "Are you sure?" "Yes," he said. "It's over." One command. A single signal. Earth's fleets received it and turned away from the void, heading home. The black-sailed freighters disappeared into subspace corridors. The weaponized silence receded. In the ruins of the Empire, what remained wasn't death. It was emptiness. Raker no longer had a flag. No anthem played over its systems. Its people wandered in dazed confusion, documents turned to gibberish, orders missing context, traditions erased. They hadn't been conquered. They'd been unwritten. Monroe left the palace without fanfare. His ship rose through the smog and fled toward starlight, bearing no trophies, only memory. The council tried to reconvene days later. Tried. No one had quorum. Many member species had defected, not from loyalty to Earth, but from survival instinct. You didn't align with a ghost. You followed the gravity that bent systems around it. One delegate, old and feathery, offered a statement. The humans do not conquer. They correct. When they love, they hold galaxies in their arms. When they mourn, they burn truth into the sky. The council adjourned without vote. Monroe returned to Earth with no medals. He walked alone through a quiet park in Colorado, the wind touching the trees like a hymn. At the top of the hill stood a small stone. Not grand. Not famous. Just a marker. Toby Monroe, explorer of stars. He looked up, and so did we. Toby placed a worn leather satchel beside the stone and sat for a while. No guards. No titles. Just a man in the place he'd started. The war hadn't been declared, but the war had ended. And Earth hadn't changed. It had just remembered what it meant to matter. Somewhere out in the dark, a ship fled into the edges of space, one of the last loyalists of the fallen empire. On board, the crew tried to access old star maps. Nothing worked. The data was gone. The Empire's seal returned a 404 code. Entry not found. The pilot cursed. What the hell happened? The comm officer looked down, pale and shaking. Earth happened. On board a Terran science vessel, children played. Their laughter echoed through the corridors, untamed and bright. One boy, maybe 10, floated in zero gravity, tracing a constellation with his fingers. "I want to find Saturn," he said. His mother, a technician, ruffled his hair. "Maybe you will." The boy blinked. "And Mars." "All of them," she whispered. "Just like the boy before you." A new era was born, not through conquest, but through caution. The galaxy never again underestimated Earth. They feared its soldiers, yes. But what they feared more were its children, and the fact that humanity had proven, without raising its voice, that every star in the sky could become a tombstone if Earth decided to write the eulogy.